So this is just an introduction to posing and how I pose during the wedding day. So we're going to be going over quite a few different poses, and the order of things matters too. So make sure that you're paying attention to not only what the poses are and how I set them up, but also the order of how I do them because they all kind of flow together. So when I go to take these pictures, there's always a couple different angles that I have in mind. First, I take a wide landscape shot, and then I take a wide portrait shot, and then I take up close shots from that. I can take an up close landscape or up close vertical, vertical shot. Okay, so we're going to start with bridal party portraits because that's how I start on the timeline. I start with bridal party portraits and then I go into bride and groom portraits. It just flows a little bit easier that way. So either after the ceremony or before the ceremony, I start with girls and guys separately, depending on how much time we have. So for the girls, the first shot that I start with is always a portrait shot. So this is the smiling shot. So I just have the girls line up with the bride in the middle and the girls on both sides. And I have them go belly button to hip bone of the person in front of them. And then I have them put their bouquets at their belly buttons. And then from there, I go into a laughing shot. So I just have them do the same thing as the smiling shot, but then I instruct them to giggle at the person to either side of them. And then from there, I go into the hug shot where they hug the bride, and I have them all just lean in towards the bride and have them kind of hug her. There's a couple different shots you can see of that. Then next, I have them go into the U, which is where I have them form a U around me as I'm standing in front of the bride. From here, you can have them look at the bride and have her look at you, or you can take a picture of the bouquets. The bouquet shot is definitely one that I make sure I get. It's good to send to florists. And then from there, you can go into a walking shot, which is where you can either have them just kind of staggered and walking towards you, laughing, or you can have them link arms and walk towards you, which I really like, and then have them giggle at each other like that. And then from there, you just go into individuals. I always ask the bride if she wants these. Most brides do, so I can do individual shots after that. The next set would be the guys, and I have them once again starting with the smiling shot. The only variation here is I tell the guys to go nuts to butts instead of belly button to hip bone because they like that a lot better. And then I have them put their hands left over right, and they know exactly what to do there. So they're all, once again, turned in towards the groom and smiling at me. And then from there, I have them kind of beat the groom up, which is where I tell them to push the groom around a little bit, and it always gets them laughing. But you have to make sure that you instruct them here, tell the groom especially, not to cover his private parts because they always do this and it looks kind of weird in pictures. So just tell them to be kind of loose, just knocking into each other. And then I do the flying V, which is where I have all the guys line up in a V Mighty Duck formation. They all are squared up towards me, and I have them put their hands left over right once again. And then I have them from there do a walking shot, which is where I have the guys walk towards me in a flying V formation. I tell them that their job is to kind of giggle at one another. They can put their hands in their pockets. They can hold onto their lapel. They can pretend to button up their shirt or their jacket or just whatever else they can think of to look more natural. And then from there, I do a variation of the walking shot, which is where I tell the guys that this is their chance to be in a James Bond movie. This is one that I do every single time because the guys always love the shot afterward. And they do the same thing basically as above, except they pretend like they're walking away from an explosion. So they have like serious faces. You have to make sure you emphasize serious faces. They can put their hands in their pockets or on their lapel or pretend to button up their jacket or whatever else. And then they walk towards me, obviously, and kind of act like models. And then from there, I just do individual shots again. So you have to make sure that you can ask the groom, hey, do you want individual shots? Some of them will say no. Some of them will say with just a couple people, or some of them will want them with everybody. So you just have to ask. And then once we get to the big bridal party with everybody, we kind of start into the same cycle. So we start with a smiling shot. You'll have the bride and groom in the middle, have the groom squared up towards you, and have the bride's belly button on his hip bone, their inside arms around each other, his outside arm in his pocket, and hers holding her bouquet at her belly button. And then you have the bridal party go girls belly button to hip bone and guys nuts to butts facing the bride and groom. And then I kind of go from there into the giggling shot again. So I have the girls and the guys stay in their last formation, but have them giggle at one of the people next to them. Tell the guys no pointing at each other because they always do that. They always like to point at each other when they're laughing for some reason. And then from there I do the woohoo shot, which is where I have everybody put their inside hands facing me in the air and shout woohoo for the bride and groom being married. And then I do what I call hype team shots. And you kind of start this out by telling the bridal party that they were chosen for a reason to be a part of the bridal party because they were the bride and groom's biggest hype people and the bride and groom really love them. And then you have them cheer on the bride and groom as they kiss, and then you have them kind of hype them up. And then I do a distance shot, which is where I have the bridal party stay where they are. So they are kind of in a line still, but they're separated. Like there's a gap where the bride and groom used to be. And then I have the bride and groom come a few feet in front of them and tell them to kiss while the bridal party smiles at them. And then from there, I have the bride and groom stay there. And then I have the bridal party run up behind them and give the bride and groom a big giant hug. So it's like a giant group hug. And then from there, I have them do a flying V, like a giant flying V with everybody. So the bridal party is all in the flying V formation. Their bodies are squared up towards me. The girls' bouquets are on their belly buttons and guys are left over right. And they just smile for a picture. And then I had them walk with the flying V. So they're all walking. The bride and groom are looking at each other. And the rest of the bridal party are looking at somebody beside them, giggling. And that should be it for the whole bridal party. So next we're going to go into bride and groom portraits. So it's exactly that. We start with a portrait. And you have to make sure that you get this shot because this is the one that mom and dad and the grandma and grandpa always want. So you start with a portrait. You tell the groom to square up towards you, put his outside hand in his pocket, and then you tell the bride to put her belly button on his hip bone and put their inner arms around each other. And then you have her arm in front holding her bouquet. I get an up close and then a far away as well. And then the next one this is kind of just to start things out loose. I start with a walking shot. So you have them look at each other and then you have her look down her shoulder and her bouquet is in her outside hand. And then I do a variation of the walking shot, which is where I have his hand around her shoulder, and then she puts her outside hand in his and holds her dress with her inside hand while he holds the bouquet. You can do a walking away shot also. I don't do this all the time, but you can just do it because they're already there. They just had our hand in hand looking at each other, the bouquet's in the outside hand facing down, and you just have them walk away from you looking at each other. But the one I always do is the backwards V, which is where they're holding hands so that her arm is on the outside facing me, so facing you, and then she looks down her arm facing you, and he looks at her. So you have to make sure that they get really close, and their arms and their bodies are in a V formation. You'll see this. And then from there I do belly button to belly button. So they go belly button to belly button, and then they wrap their arms around each other. and there's a few variations of this. So one, they can go nose to nose and forehead to forehead, just get really close and intimate. And then two, you can have him brush the hair out of her face, so that looks really intimate as well. And then three, you can have him put his nose on her temple and have her put her front arm around his waist and have her look down at her arm. Like that look, you just say, look down your arm. And then you can have her look at you also. And then you can have them hold their front hands, number 4. So they just go belly button to belly button, wrap their back arms around each other, and their front hands are just holding each other. And make sure that they're like interlinking fingers, because it looks weird if they don't. From there, I kind of go into this prom pose variation, which is where I have her back to his front, and then have them hold their front hands while they nuzzle each other. You can also have him put his arms just around her waist, and just have them both look down their arms, their front arms. And then from there, you can kind of go into this T formation, which is where I have him basically at a 45-degree angle away from me. Then she puts her shoulder into his chest. He puts his arms around her chest, like almost to hug her. And then she puts her hands on his arms. You can also have her put her hand on his face as they nuzzle, but you don't need a bouquet for this. From there, you can do an arm hug, which is where you have him square up towards you, and then he puts both of his hands in his pockets, and then she hugs his arm. This is a good opportunity to get a ring shot, and she lays her head on his shoulder. And then you can have her look at you, have both of them look at you, then you can have her look at him. And then from there, just have her, if this is another shot, have her hug him from behind. So he's squared up towards you now. So instead of the 45-degree angle, have him square up towards you with his outside hand in his pocket, and then have her hug him from behind so that she's towards the side so that you can see her, and then he can put his other hand around hers. So then from there, I do one that's my husband's favorite, which is called tackle football, which is where I have her in front of him facing me, and he stands a ways from her, so a couple of feet back, and then he runs up behind her to give her a big bear hug. So he has to have enough distance to kind of gain a little momentum, but you have to coach both of them in this. Him, you have to make sure that his head goes over her left shoulder when he hugs her, and that his arms go around her waist. And then for her, you have him envelop her, like just tell her he's going to envelop you, and then when he envelops you, you just put your arms around his when he meets you. So it's like just a big bear hug, which they really like this one. So next, I have them do a lift, which is where you have them face each other, so they're belly button to belly button, and then he picks her up right underneath her bottom. She puts her hands behind his head and her elbows to rest on his shoulders, and then she kicks her feet out and lets the dress swing around. And then from there, I kind of have them twirl like this, so I have them start to spin because it makes them both giggle. And then I have him put her back down, and then I do a dress twirl, which is where I have him square up towards you, and then he holds the bouquet in his outside hand. The bouquet, make sure the bouquet is facing you, and then you have her squared up towards you as well, and then you have them take their inside hands. So it's the hand that's, if they're both squared up towards you, it's on the inside. You have them take those hands, and then you have them hold them above their heads, and then she will take her dress. So I usually have her take close to the bottom of her dress so that it kind of loops out just a little bit, and then she spins in towards him. So she spins clockwise or counterclockwise, I guess, depending on where you're standing, but she's spinning in towards him. And then the next two are only if she has a veil on, because you can't do them without a veil. So the first one is a veil toss. So you have them go belly button to belly button with his hands around her waist and her front hand resting on the back of his bicep. And then you have her back hand, holding the bouquet facing you around his neck. So, yeah. And then you have them go in for a kiss just as a bridesmaid or a helper or somebody takes the veil, gently tosses it in the air, and runs out of the shot. So you're taking continuous shots right there. And then the next one is also if she has a veil on, you have them go belly button to belly button and wrap their arms around each other's waists. And then you take the veil and make a C shape with it so that you can shoot through it. So you kind of let the wind take it, and I just kind of toss it to the side and then pull it back towards me, and then I shoot through it. So those are really the main ones that I do. If there's obviously more, and there's more variations you can do by just having them simply move their heads one way or the other, or move the bouquet, or just having somebody face you or look up at you or look down their arm or whatever. But those are the main ones that I do, and they tend to work out pretty well. You just have to give clear directions. So watch the video a couple times. Make sure that you pay attention to how I'm saying to do the shots, because that's exactly how I instruct them to do the shots too. And they usually get it pretty well. So that's it.